I'm Drew, a lawyer in British Columbia who helps people understand the law. As someone who has worked for years with nonprofit organizations in BC, I'm excited to be helping people understand a new law that affects nonprofits across the province. This new law, called the Societies Act, is in effect as of November 28, 2016. One way it affects every nonprofit society in BC relates to society bylaws. Bylaws set out the rules for governing and operating the society. Most societies have some bylaws that conflict with the new Act. As of November 28, 2016, those bylaws have no effect. Having bylaws that are offside the new Act risks creating confusion among your members and directors as to what rules prevail. As well, even if you're generally satisfied with your existing bylaws, you may want to take advantage of increased flexibility offered by the new Act in a number of areas. The net effect: it's a very good idea to conduct a review of your society's existing bylaws to align them with the new Act. This video walks you through the steps involved. First, decide on your approach. There are a couple of different ways to approach a bylaw review. One is to revise your society's existing bylaws with an eye to the new Act. A second approach is to adopt the new model bylaws and revise them to fit your society's needs. There is a third option: to undergo a detailed review of your society's vision and operations and use this opportunity to overhaul your bylaws. While that approach is very much encouraged for those who feel they can take it on, this video focuses on the first two options. A bit more about each option. Option 1, revising your society's existing bylaws, features working through your society's current bylaws to consider whether provisions in the new Societies Act are at odds with the bylaws, or offer options to adapt the bylaws to better fit your society's needs. If your society currently uses the model bylaws under the old Society Act, they may not need radical changes. The old model bylaws, often called Schedule B bylaws because they appeared in Schedule B of the old Society Act, are for the most part compliant with the new Act. That said, there are a few clauses in the Schedule B model bylaws that are somewhat in tension with the new Act, and other clauses that don't take full advantage of the flexibility provided under the new Act. For example, under the new Act, a society's directors have discretion to issue a debenture on borrowing funds, unless the bylaws restrict that discretion, which the Schedule B bylaws do by requiring a special resolution of members to issue a debenture. So effectively, that clause of the Schedule B bylaws curtails the flexibility introduced with the new Act. For these reasons, even though those using the old Schedule B model bylaws may not need to make extensive changes, conducting a bylaw review is still recommended. The second option, instead of reviewing your current bylaws, is to adopt the new model bylaws and customize them to fit your society's needs. In other words, on transitioning your society under the new Act, you can scrap your current bylaws and start afresh. You're free to adopt a new set of bylaws entirely. The new set could be the new model bylaws under the Act, found in Schedule 1 of the new Society's Regulation. These model bylaws contain basic clauses for governing and operating a society, such as the conduct of meetings and the role of directors, that align with the new Act. The model bylaws may be a good option for societies with a small membership that need a very simple structure, or societies that need a temporary solution. That said, it is not recommended to adopt the model bylaws straight out of the box. The model bylaws will likely need several changes to reflect the specific needs of your society. Step 2 in conducting a bylaw review is working through a clause-by-clause analysis. Whether you're working from your society's existing bylaws or the new model bylaws, you should work through each clause with an eye to two factors. First, consider if the clause aligns with the new Societies Act. Second, consider if the clause supports the needs of your society. Let's look at an example dealing with quorum at general meetings. The relevant provision in the new Societies Act is Section 82, which reads, "The quorum for the transaction of business at a general meeting is 3 voting members. The bylaws of a society may provide for a quorum that is greater than 3 voting members by doing either of the following: A, specifying the number of voting members that constitutes a quorum, or B, requiring that the quorum be calculated as a specified percentage of voting members or on another basis." Let's say the provision in the society's existing bylaws was drawn from the old model bylaws under Schedule B and reads, "A quorum is 3 members present or a greater number that the members may determine at a general meeting." Meanwhile, the provision in the new model bylaws reads, the quorum for the transaction of business at a general meeting is 3 voting members or 10% of the voting members, whichever is greater. So let's work through our analysis. Step 1. Does the clause align with the new Societies Act? There are some issues arising from the Society's existing bylaw when read together with the relevant provision in the new Act. So the existing bylaw refers to members present. The provision in the new Act refers to voting members. As well, the provision in the new Act contemplates the bylaws specifying the number of voting members or requiring a calculation as a percentage of voting members or on another basis. Yet the existing bylaws say, or a greater number that the members may determine at a general meeting. That wording doesn't specify a number of voting members or a calculation, which places the wording in the existing bylaw somewhat in tension with the wording of the new Act. So working through the second step, does the clause support the needs of your society? Let's look at the new model bylaw, which provides for a quorum of 3 voting members or 10% of voting members, whichever is greater. You'll want to consider whether 3 voting members is too few for your society. As well, what percentage of voting members might be a good fit for your society, and whether a different mechanism to determine quorum, so long as it complied with the new Act, would be preferable. For example, for societies with larger memberships, 10% of voting members can be very hard to achieve. For a society with 2,000 members, 10% is 200 people, a very large number to try to get out to an AGM. A higher fixed number and a lower percentage, say 20 voting members or 2% of voting members, could be a better fit for a society of that size. Now that you have a sense for what to consider, it's a matter of working through the clauses in your bylaws one by one. In the next video, I'll cover some key clauses to look at in conducting your bylaw review to try to help you get going. Finally, step 3 in conducting a bylaw review is amending the actual bylaws. This is the final step in the process, whether you're amending existing bylaws or adopting new bylaws on transition, and it requires getting member approval. Any bylaw changes need to be approved by a special resolution of members. After November 26, 2016, the default threshold to approve a special resolution is 2/3 of the votes cast at a member's meeting. The exception is if a society has a higher voting threshold for special resolutions, such as 3/4, set out in their bylaws. In that case, the higher threshold will apply, as increased voting thresholds are permitted under the new Societies Act. In the next video, we'll have a closer look at 7 bylaws that could form the start of a bylaw review.